Good morning. I'm going to continue with the beautiful little book of talks from Vimala Thakar, I think in 1985 in Australia. And this chapter is called Masters and Students. Let me see. Masters and Disciples. What is a guru, a master, and what is a disciple? Can there be any relationship between the two? We need first to understand the origins of the words if we are to grasp their present meaning. Thus, throughout Indian history, one finds that education had quite a different meaning for the ancient Indians. It was much more than learning to read and write or learning mathematics, the free arts, geography, or physical sciences. These were considered necessary, but the essence of education was in learning to discover one's own nature, that is, self-realization. It was said that all the knowledge about matter, the world, and the cosmos would amount to the total darkness of ignorance if one did not understand one's own nature. The educators, or rishis, lived in forests far away from the cities and towns. Rishi is a Sanskrit word for seer or sage, one who can see into the totality of life. The rishis lived with their families and the students became as family members. As soon as a student accepted learning through living with the teacher, he became a disciple or chela. Willingness to learn in this way constitutes the essence of discipleship, to discipline oneself in order to learn and to learn in order to live. The student would be taken as an apprentice for a couple of weeks, and if he and his parents liked the place and the way of living, the student would then be admitted to the Rishi Kulet, the school of the Rishi. Only then would the teacher allow the student to call him a guru. Master and student would live and work together for years, chop the wood, do agriculture, look after the animals, learn together. There's a fascinating story, historically verified, about the life of Shankaracharya, the exponent of Vedanta, who was 8 years old when he went to his prospective teacher. The teacher was living in a cave on the banks of a river in central India. The boy walked up to the cave and said, Om, as one would knock on the door in Western countries. The teacher asked, Who is there? And the boy replied, Your reflection. Why have you come here? Said the teacher. I have come to see the origin of the reflection. The teacher came out and prostrated himself before the boy of 8 years old, saying, Welcome, you have come here to honor me with the privilege of teaching you. May it be so. Do you see the relationship of perfect equality between the two, the mutual acceptance and respect? A person becomes a teacher when the learner is willing to learn from the life and the teachings in this way. The teachings are more important than the teacher. Learning is more than a so-called relationship. That was a way of life and of education in India. Living and education were not separate. There were no schools apart from the centers or ashrams where the rishis lived. The word ashrama comes from shrama, meaning labor, hard work, and ashrama is a place for relaxation from every kind of labor. Learning was not an intellectual or fragmented activity and was concerned with much more than the acquisition of knowledge. It was to enable a person to manifest his or her potential. A teacher of sciences like Hatha Yoga or Mantra Yoga or other techniques was not called a guru. In Sanskrit, a guru was one who could share understanding about the nature of reality, that ultimate reality contained in the human form, as well as in all other forms in the universe. In other words, a guru was a person who had transcended the center of the me, who had transcended duality and all its tensions. There was no commercialism about it, no sale, purchase, business, no charging fees. If you read the Upanishads and the Vedas, you will see the important implications of the dozens of instances where a student, after spending a couple of years with the teacher, said, "I am very sorry, sir. I do not agree with what you have been teaching us. So may I take your leave now?" The teacher would bless the student, saying, "Please do go and discover places where you can learn. And after learning, come back and teach me." It was a very flexible and beautiful relationship without owning or possessing. The words have traveled through the centuries, gathering the dust of misinterpretation, misunderstanding, credulity, beliefs, and tradition, and have come to mean something quite different from what they originally meant. Now that there are no forests and no such teachers allowing students of life to live with them, what are we to do? How shall we learn with nobody to tell us? How do we become disciples, learners? We've been talking about learning by oneself, and to begin learning by watching our own lives. We have found out that we are bundles of conditioning, of knowledge and experience, patterns of behavior, fears, jealousies, and violence. What shall we do about that conditioning? We're anxious to learn, so shall we reject it? Yet both attachment and rejection are ways of relating oneself to conditioning. Will revolting against it unconditioned consciousness? Do we just go on negating everything? Can conditioning be destroyed? Can it be wished away, explained away? Would you want to kick the earth because the law of gravity is a bondage to your feet? Or would you use the law of gravity in order to walk, run, and climb? The earth is what it has been and what it shall be. To negate, deny, or reject it does not change the substance of the earth. In the same way, denying or rejecting conditioning is not going to change its nature. Conditioning will still be there, as is the color of my skin, right within me in the form of various vibrations. What one can do is not accept its authority or allow the past to condition one's perception. Once you discover the past, conditioning as conditioning, and attach no importance to it, you do not pamper and worship it, then maybe awareness of conditioning and its nature will liberate you from its clutches. Conditioning is still there, like burned out ashes, harmless, once you do not accept its authority. Not to accept the authority of conditioning is a serious matter. The world accepts the authority of the past, All the divisions and fragmentations of nations, races, religions, all the ideological, political, and economic divisions. It accepts the authority of sciences like ethics, morality, organized religion, the authority of violence and hatred. They're all accepted. When we say we do not accept the authority of conditioning, we imply that we do not accept the authority of violence, of untruth, divisions, fragmentations, of money, power, and pleasure. Having seen how affluence, political power, and violence corrupt our being, is there a willingness in us not to accept the authority of any of these whatsoever? When you are no more an Indian or a New Zealander, no more a Catholic, a Hindu, Buddhist, or Christian, when you drop all the labels formulated by the human mind and remain in the glory of the nudity of consciousness, then you begin to live. Do you see how austere it is to be religious? Renunciation is really not accepting the authority of the mind, of thought. Renunciation is not in giving up homes, clothes, wives, or children and running away to the mountains. That is all very immature. The world does not exist outside of you. You are the world. You are society because in your consciousness are all the value structures organized and standardized by society. The world is right there within you. When there is a willingness not to accept the authority of the mind, we can begin to learn. The mind asks how it can learn alone. It feels that it is a very dangerous path. I will find a teacher, it says, then it will be safe for me to investigate and explore. There is the urge for freedom, but as soon as the thought structure appreciates the intensity, the depth of that urge, it begins to play its tricks. It says, go ahead. If you want to find freedom, seek out a safe place and some safe teachers to do that. One wants to discover the essence of freedom. It begins by accepting authority. It is the trap of the mind which says that we will throw away all the old authorities, but give us some new ones. Accepting authority is actually looking at reality through the words of someone else. We have to see what is implied in accepting authority, what it means not to accept authority. Otherwise, we may be misled. You read books, you attend talks, and you learn without becoming emotionally attached to the person through whom the words come. But when you convert that person into an authority, you hang on to their words and cling to them. You weave a net of authority around the person. You begin to believe that the person himself is greater than reality. When you discover the truth, it is like lighting a candle from one already lit. Then each burns on its own. There is a meeting between the learner and the one who has already learned, but there's no relationship. Accepting an authority is imposing a relationship upon the enlightened person. When there is enlightenment or liberation, there is no center as the me, no person in that body. There is the majesty of nobodiness, no personness. The person has a physical body, and the bodily functions continue spontaneously, but there is no identity as the me, wanting to retain its separateness from the rest of life. It is the universal life that vibrates in that person. When there is no me in that person, how can a relationship be established? To impose a psychological relationship on the enlightened person is creating an authority out of him or her. This is a serious issue. Not to accept authority implies that you learn, you discover the truth, and in the elegance of freedom, you live the truth that you have discovered. It may only be a tiny bit of truth, but once you begin to live that tiny bit in the light of your own understanding, then the rest happens. The tiny bit is an emanation of the totality, not a part of totality, but an expression, an emanation of it. To be a disciple, therefore, is to focus all the energies on learning, not on learner nor teacher. It is very difficult to come across a real teacher because that teacher does not put up signboards nor enter into the business of selling spirituality or religion. However, if life brings a learner across the path of a teacher, it is what happens. One can learn and move on, live one's own life, be a light unto oneself after learning, without converting the person into an authority. That is, there are people who could be called gurus or teachers, but there cannot be a time-bound psychological relationship with them. When there is a genuine inquiry and a passion for discovery of the truth, when there is a divine dissatisfaction with everything except that inquiry, and a person becomes a living flame of the inquiry, meetings do take place. The meeting of learner and teacher may be only a moment, but that moment is eternity. Though physically they may be poles apart, there will not be any separation hereafter. However, apparently, that is not what we want. We want to learn from a person and say, "This is my guru, and my guru is greater than your guru." We want to compare, to own, to possess. We find out how many people are around that teacher, and then that the master smiles at one and not at another, frowns at a third, and there are fights and quarrels among the so-called disciples. Living in a country where there are hundreds, if not thousands, who claim to be Bhagwans and gurus, one sees credulous, naive people victimized by their advertisements and propaganda. There are ashrams everywhere in India, and people willingly create a kind of slavery. They turn away from their own civilization, their parents and teachers, from everything, and go to India willingly accepting slavery. It seems, therefore, that there cannot be a relationship between a master or a teacher and a learner, only a meeting, a happening, not a relationship. Someone who wants to discover the meaning of life and relationship has to trust his or her understanding, his or her own understanding. When you read a book and understand, you trust the understanding, not the book. If in living that understanding it is shown that truth is not exactly as it was described in the book, a disciple of life has the courage to say that the book is faulty, it is wrong. The light of his own truth and understanding is much more important than what was written in the book. The books are not holy, it is understanding. that is holy. Of what use is the Sermon on the Mount for the Christian world when it says that if someone strikes you on one cheek, then give him the other, or if someone asks for a shirt, to give him the cloak? Has that any relevance without understanding? Christians may build churches and cathedrals, as the Hindus have built their temples and Muslims their mosques, and glorify themselves by those constructions. But the magnificent communications of Jesus of Nazareth, where are they? Where are the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, who was a messenger of peace and created peace among various tribes in the Middle East? Where are the teachings of the Buddha? We are obsessed with the person and their personal details to such an extent that we forget the teachings. We create sects and dogmas and begin to fight again, find new weapons for jealousy, for ambition, fighting and violence. So much blood has been shed in the name of religion and spirituality. There has been so much hypocrisy in the name of the guru-disciple relationship. Can we then find a new approach to religious inquiry, where the disciples do not exploit the teacher by creating an authority out of them, where there is no exploitation of the learners by the teacher, where the relationship is just one of learning and sharing? What is the relationship, for example, between this speaker and the listeners? We meet here as friends and will soon part. Life brought us together and we have shared a beautiful time. Is there any relationship between us except that we are fellow inquirers and fellow residents of this planet? This, in itself, is a beautiful thing. In industrially and technologically advanced countries, modern civilization is not congenial to the human mind. In this mechanized, depersonalized, and dehumanized way of life, one feels lonely and would be pleased to find places where like-minded people were living, ashrams where there could be a humane relationship. People gather together, live in a commune or ashram, which is beautiful, but it is to fulfill a psychological need for spiritual inquiry. One need ah, People gather together, live in a commune or ashram, which is beautiful, but it is to fulfill a psychological need, not for spiritual inquiry. One need not feel self-righteous or holy about it. Gratification of psychological needs is as important as gratification of physical needs. However, inquiry about the ultimate nature of reality, the meaning of love, the mystery of relationship must be conducted in the sanctity, the sanctuary of aloneness. You inquire, you understand, you live that understanding. You take a step and living enriches your understanding, adds depth to it. If you find that your own understanding is inadequate, you, you falter and you make a mistake. There's nothing wrong in that. In doing wrong things, in making mistakes, for the wrongdoing becomes a teacher, creating an inner compulsion to find out what went wrong and why it did so. While I am inquiring, the momentum of conditioning comes back. I become aware of its return and I wait. I stop as soon as I see that conditioning. So while I am inquiring, the momentum of conditioning comes back. I become aware of its return and I wait. I stop As soon as I see that conditioning, the past, is overwhelming me, and I do not want to accept that authority. If you do not try to suppress or control the momentum or cover it up, then it subsides. The very act of controlling only adds more momentum. When this is recognized, pause for a moment so that there is space between the momentum and oneself. Then the darkness of unawareness or inattention is gone. You will be attentive. You are attentive, alert. You see it, and the seeing of it is the remedy. You see the past as it comes up in the form of anger, jealousy, intolerance, or violence, and you do not run away from it or say, violence is coming, now I must become non-violent. What shall I do to become non-violent? In that, we are running away from the fact as it is to its opposite. The opposite actually contains the fact from which we are running. When I notice the past as conditioning coming up, the upsurge of perceiving is a very great event. I see, I look at it, and I stop. That perception, that total act of looking, and the power of the fact act upon each other. So, that perception, that total act of looking, and the power of the fact act upon each other. What would be the content of conditioning if I did not immediately imagine how the past may act upon me? What would happen if I did not construct an image, but just stayed put when it came? Can you look at a sexual impulse, lust for power, greed, or ambition as you look at your hands and feet? The very perception of that as the inner you could liberate. It must be the action of the whole mind, not a mind dividing itself into the actor and conditioning. Understanding is the master, the guru. The courage to stay with the fact is the disciple. There is a master and a disciple within us all. So thank you. This is the end of this beautiful chapter. I wish you all a great day. Hope to see you again. Bye for now.